In the shadows of history, where legends blur with truth and myth becomes reality, there exists a tale that has been deliberately erased from the chronicles of Westeros. It is the story of an ancient brotherhood, older than the Targaryens themselves, and their sacred covenant with the most dangerous prince who ever lived. This is the untold account of the Pact of Blood, the secret alliance between Daemon Targaryen and the Forgotten Order that shaped the destiny of dragons and men alike. The Order of the Crimson Dawn had existed for over 1,000 years before Aegon the Conqueror ever set foot on Westeros' soil. Founded in the aftermath of the Long Night, when the world still trembled from the memory of ice and darkness, the Order was created by survivors who understood that some threats transcended the petty squabbles of kings and kingdoms. They were the Watchers in the shadows, the guardians of ancient knowledge, the keepers of secrets that could either save or damn the world. Unlike the Maesters with their chains of service, or the Septons with their seven-pointed stars, the Order of the Crimson Dawn served no earthly master. Their loyalty was to the balance itself, to the eternal struggle between light and darkness, fire and ice, creation and destruction. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, always watching, always waiting, always preparing for the moment when an intervention would be needed most. The Order's origins could be traced back to the survivors of the first Long Night, those brave souls who had stood with Azor Ahai against the darkness and lived to tell the tale. They had learned hard lessons about the price of power and the danger of leaving the world's fate in the hands of those who sought only glory and conquest. When the darkness was finally defeated, they made a sacred vow to ensure that such a catastrophe would never again catch humanity unprepared. Over the centuries, the Order had evolved from a simple brotherhood of warriors into something far more complex and sophisticated. They became scholars and sorcerers, spies and assassins, healers and destroyers. They infiltrated every level of society, from the highest noble houses to the lowest criminal organizations, always watching for signs of the ancient threats that might one day return. The Order's greatest strength lay not in their numbers, which were always small, but in their knowledge. They maintained vast libraries hidden in secret locations across the known world, filled with texts that predated the doom of Valyria and contained wisdom that the Maesters of Old Town could scarcely imagine. They knew the true history of the world, the real reasons behind the rise and fall of civilizations, and the hidden connections that bound all living things together. When the Targaryens arrived in Westeros with their dragons and their dreams of conquest, the Order watched with great interest. They recognized in these dragon lords the potential for both salvation and destruction, the power to either protect the world or consume it entirely. The dragons themselves were of particular concern, for the Order's ancient texts spoke of the role these magnificent creatures would play in the battles yet to come. The Order's first direct contact with House Targaryen came during the reign of Aegon the Conqueror himself. A member of the Brotherhood, operating under the guise of a Maester, had gained access to Dragonstone and observed the young dynasty's growing power. His reports back to the Order's leadership were both encouraging and troubling. The Targaryens possessed the strength needed to face the ancient threats, but they also carried within them the seeds of their own destruction. It was during the reign of King Jaehaerys I that the Order made their first tentative overtures to the Targaryen court. They approached the king through intermediaries, offering their knowledge and assistance in exchange for certain guarantees about how the dragons would be used. Jaehaerys, wise beyond his years, recognized the value of what they offered, but was too cautious to fully trust these mysterious strangers. The negotiations between the Order and the Targaryens continued for years, conducted in secret chambers and hidden alcoves, away from the prying eyes of courtiers and chroniclers. The Order revealed carefully selected portions of their knowledge, demonstrating their understanding of ancient prophecies and their ability to see patterns that others missed. In return, they asked for access to the dragons themselves, the right to study these magnificent creatures and understand their true nature. The breakthrough came when the Order's seers began to have visions of a prince who would be born to the Targaryen line, a man whose destiny would be intertwined with the fate of the world itself. They saw him as both savior and destroyer, a figure of immense power who would either lead humanity to its greatest triumph or its final doom. This prince, they realized, would need guidance and protection, unlike any that had come before. The visions showed them a man with silver hair and violet eyes, riding a dragon the color of blood through skies filled with fire and shadow. They saw him standing at the crossroads of history, making choices that would echo through the ages. Most importantly, They saw that he would face enemies and challenges that no mortal man could overcome alone. He would need allies who understood the true nature of the threats he faced. Guardians who could protect him from dangers both seen and unseen. When Daemon Targaryen was born in 81 AC, the Order's Watchers were already in place. They had spent decades preparing for his arrival, studying the prophecies, and positioning their agents throughout the realm. From the moment he drew his first breath, Daemon was under their protection, though he would not learn of their existence for many years to come. The Order's guardianship of Daemon was unlike anything they had ever attempted before. Previous interventions had been limited in scope, focused on specific threats or particular moments of crisis. But Daemon represented something different, a figure whose entire life would be crucial to the world's survival. They could not simply watch and wait. They had to actively shape his development, guide his choices, and ensure that he would be ready when the time came to fulfill his destiny. The first challenge came during Daemon's childhood, when it became clear that he possessed abilities that went far beyond those of ordinary Targaryens. He could communicate with dragons in ways that even his dragon-riding relatives found unsettling, and he displayed an intuitive understanding of ancient magic that should have been impossible for someone so young. The Order recognized these gifts as signs of his prophetic importance, but they also understood that such power could easily corrupt or destroy him if not properly channeled. Working through carefully placed agents within the Red Keep, the Order began to influence Daemon's education. They ensured that he was exposed to the right texts, introduced to the right teachers, and given opportunities to develop his abilities in controlled environments. They also worked to protect him from those who might seek to exploit his gifts for their own purposes, using their network of spies and assassins to eliminate threats before they could materialize. The Order's most significant intervention came when Daemon was 16 years old and beginning to show signs of the reckless behavior that would later define his reputation. He had been caught attempting to steal dragon eggs from the dragon pit, not for personal gain but out of a desire to understand the deep magic that bound dragons to their riders. The incident could have resulted in his exile or worse, but the Order's agents within the court managed to cover up the affair and redirect the blame elsewhere. It was then that the Order decided to reveal themselves to Daemon directly. The meeting took place in the crypts beneath the Red Keep, in a chamber that had been forgotten by all but the most ancient records. Daemon was led there by a servant who claimed to have a message from his brother, King Viserys. But when he arrived, he found himself face to face with three figures in crimson robes, their faces hidden by deep hoods. The leader of the delegation was a woman known only as the Crimson Seer, one of the Order's most powerful members and a direct descendant of those who had fought in the First Long Night. She spoke to Daemon in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, telling him of his true destiny and the role he was meant to play in the battles to come. "You are not merely a prince of House Targaryen," she told him, her words echoing in the ancient chamber. "You are the fulfillment of prophecies that were old when your ancestors first tamed dragons. The blood that flows in your veins carries the power to either save this world or see it consumed by darkness. We are here to ensure that you choose the path of salvation." Daemon's initial reaction was skepticism and anger. He had always prided himself on his independence, his refusal to bow to anyone's will, and the idea that his life had been shaped by unseen forces was deeply disturbing to him. But as the Crimson Seer revealed more of what they knew, showing him visions of possible futures, and explaining the true nature of the threats that faced the world, he began to understand the magnitude of what was at stake. The Order showed him glimpses of the ancient enemy that had once brought the Long Night, the malevolent force that still lurked beyond the edges of the known world, waiting for another opportunity to strike. They revealed the connections between the dragons and the old magic, explaining how these magnificent creatures were not just weapons but living embodiments of the forces that kept the world in balance. Most importantly, they showed him how his own choices and actions would determine whether humanity would survive the trials that lay ahead. The revelation of the Order's existence and their interest in his fate was overwhelming for young Daemon. He had always known that he was different from his peers, that he possessed abilities and insights that others lacked. But he had never imagined that his entire life had been shaped by forces beyond his understanding. The knowledge was both liberating and terrifying, offering him a sense of purpose while also burdening him with responsibilities that seemed impossible to bear. The formal Pact of Blood was signed 3 days later, in a ceremony that took place in the deepest chambers of Dragons. Daemon had insisted on moving the ritual to his family's ancestral seat, wanting to ensure that any agreement he made would be witnessed by the spirits of his ancestors and blessed by the dragons themselves. The Order agreed, recognizing the symbolic importance of the location and the power that flowed through the volcanic island. The ceremony itself was unlike anything recorded in the histories of West. It combined elements of ancient Valyrian blood magic with rituals that predated the Doom by millennia. Demons stood in a circle of carved dragonstone, surrounded by members of the Order who chanted in languages that had been dead for centuries. At the center of the circle burned a flame that was neither red nor orange, but a deep crimson that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The Pact itself was written in High Valyrian, on parchment made from dragon hide, using ink mixed with demons' own blood and substances that the Order had gathered from the far corners of the world. The terms were complex and binding, creating obligations and protections that would last for as long as Daemon lived and beyond. Under the terms of the Pact, the Order pledged to protect Daemon from all threats, both physical and mystical, that might prevent him from fulfilling his destiny. They would provide him with knowledge and resources, guide his development, and ensure that he would be ready when the time came to face the ancient enemy. In return, Daemon swore to serve the greater good, to use his power and position to protect the innocent, and to make the hard choices that would be necessary to preserve the world. The Pact also contained provisions for the protection of Daemon's bloodline, ensuring that his descendants would carry on his mission, even if he himself fell in battle. The Order pledged to watch over House Targaryen for generations to come, guiding them through the trials that lay ahead, and ensuring that the knowledge and power needed to face the darkness would never be lost. But perhaps the most significant aspect of the Pact was the binding it created between Daemon and the dragons themselves. The Order's ancient magic strengthened his natural connection to these magnificent creatures, allowing him to communicate with them on a level that transcended the normal bonds between rider and mount. This enhanced connection would prove crucial in the battles to come, giving Daemon abilities that even other dragon riders would find impossible to match. The immediate effects of the Pact were subtle but profound. Daemon found that his understanding of ancient magic deepened dramatically, and he began to have visions of his own that complemented those of the Order's seers. He could sense threats before they materialized, understand the hidden motivations of those around him, and see the long-term consequences of his actions in ways that had been impossible before. The Order's protection manifested in numerous ways. Over the years that followed, assassins sent to kill Daemon would mysteriously disappear before they could strike. Political enemies would find their plans unraveling due to seemingly random events. Daemon himself would often receive warnings about dangers he faced, sometimes in dreams, sometimes through seemingly chance encounters with strangers, who would whisper crucial information before vanishing into the crowd. The most dramatic demonstration of the Order's protection came during Daemon's campaign in the steppe. The war against the Triarchy had been going badly, with Daemon's forces outnumbered and outmaneuvered by their enemies. It seemed certain that the Rogue Prince would meet his end on those distant islands, far from the dragons and the throne he had always coveted. But on the night before what should have been the final battle, Daemon received an unexpected visitor. A woman in crimson robes appeared in his tent, bearing intelligence about the enemy's plans and weaknesses that turned the tide of the entire campaign. She also brought with her a weapon that had been forged specifically for this moment, a blade of Valyrian steel that had been blessed with the Order's most powerful enchantments. The weapon, which Daemon would later name Bloodbane, was unlike any sword that had ever been forged. It could cut through armor as if it were cloth, and its edge never dulled, no matter how many enemies it struck down. But its most remarkable property was its ability to wound creatures that were normally immune to mortal weapons. Beings of shadow and ice that served the ancient enemy and could not be harmed by conventional means. With Bloodbane in his hand and the Order's intelligence guiding his strategy, Daemon achieved a victory that seemed impossible. The Triarchy's forces were routed, their leaders killed or captured, and the stepstones were secured for House Targaryen. But more importantly, the battle served as a test of Daemon's abilities and his commitment to the pact he had made. He had proven that he could be trusted with the Order's most precious secrets and their most powerful weapons. The years that followed saw Daemon's relationship with the Order deepen and evolve. He became not just a protected asset, but an active participant in their ancient mission. He learned to read the signs and portents that warned of approaching dangers, to understand the complex web of cause and effect that governed the fate of nations, and to make the hard choices that were necessary to preserve the greater good. The Order's influence on Daemon's life became most apparent during his marriage to Lena Valerian. The union had been arranged not for political reasons, as most assumed, but because the Order's seers had identified Lena as a crucial figure in the prophecies surrounding Daemon's destiny. Her bloodline carried traces of ancient magic that would strengthen any children she bore, and her own abilities as a dragonrider would complement Daemon's in ways that would prove essential in the battles to come. The birth of Daemon's daughters, Bala and Rana, was celebrated by the Order as a triumph of their long-term planning. The girls carried within them the combined magical heritage of both their parents, making them potentially the most powerful dragon riders of their generation. The Order immediately began making plans for their protection and education, ensuring that they would be ready to play their own roles in the great drama that was unfolding. But the Order's greatest test came during the Dance of Dragons, the civil war that tore House Targaryen apart and nearly destroyed the dynasty that they had worked so hard to protect. The conflict presented them with an impossible choice. Both sides of the war contained members of the bloodline they were sworn to protect, and both sides had legitimate claims to the throne that would be crucial in the battles against the ancient enemy. The Order's solution was characteristically complex and long-term in its thinking. Rather than choosing sides in the immediate conflict, they worked to ensure that the war would end in a way that preserved the essential elements of Targaryen power, while eliminating the weaknesses that had made the civil war possible in the first place. They manipulated events from the shadows, ensuring that certain key figures survived while others fell, always keeping their eyes on the larger picture. Daemon's role in this grand strategy was perhaps the most crucial of all. His death at the Battle of the God's Eye was not the random tragedy that history recorded, but a carefully orchestrated sacrifice that served multiple purposes. By eliminating Aemond One Eye, he removed one of the most dangerous and unstable elements from the Targaryen bloodline. By dying in such a dramatic fashion, he became a legend that would inspire future generations, and by making his sacrifice at the God's Eye, a location of immense magical significance, he ensured that his essence would be preserved in ways that would allow him to continue serving the Order's mission even after death. The Order's agents were present at the battle, using their magic to ensure that Daemon's sacrifice would not be in vain. They preserved his consciousness at the moment of death, binding it to the ancient magic that flowed through the God's Eye and ensuring that he would be able to return when the world needed him most. This was the ultimate expression of the Pact of Blood, a binding so strong that it transcended even death itself. In the centuries that followed, the Order continued to watch over House Targaryen, guiding them through the various crises that threatened their rule. They were present during the Blackfire rebellions, working to ensure that the legitimate line would survive the challenges posed by the bastard claimants. They influenced the events at Summerhall, trying to prevent the tragedy that would claim so many Targaryen lives while still allowing for the birth of the prince, who would be needed in the final battle. The Order's most significant intervention came during Robert's Rebellion, when it seemed that House Targaryen would be completely destroyed. Working through their agents, they ensured that Daenerys and Viserys would escape to Estos, preserving the bloodline that would be crucial to the world's survival. They also worked to protect the dragon eggs that would eventually hatch into the creatures that would restore Targaryen power. When Daenerys finally hatched her dragons in the funeral pyre of Khal Drogo, the Order's seers recognized it as the fulfillment of prophecies that had been centuries in the making. The return of dragons to the world was not just a restoration of Targaryen power, but a sign that the final battle against the ancient enemy was approaching. The Order immediately began making preparations for this ultimate confrontation, calling in favors and activating agents that had been dormant for generations. The Order's role in Daenerys' conquest of Slaver's Bay was subtle but crucial. They provided intelligence about her enemies, ensured that key allies would support her cause, and worked to protect her from the various assassination attempts that were made against her. They also began the delicate process of preparing her for the role she would need to play in the battles to come, though they were careful not to reveal too much too quickly. The greatest challenge the Order faced was Daenerys' growing instability and her tendency toward the same madness that had plagued other members of her bloodline. They recognized that her power was necessary for the coming battle, but they also understood that her mental state made her potentially as dangerous as the enemies she was meant to fight. The solution they developed was both elegant and tragic. They would use her power to defeat the immediate threats, while ensuring that she would not survive to become a threat herself. The Order's influence on the events in Westeros during Daenerys' invasion was extensive and carefully coordinated. They worked to ensure that the various factions would be weakened by their conflicts, making it easier for the ancient enemy to reveal itself when the time came. They also positioned their agents in key locations, ready to act when the final battle began. The revelation of the Order's existence and their role in shaping Targaryen history came during the final confrontation with the Night King and his army of the dead. As the forces of darkness swept south from beyond the wall, the Order finally emerged from the shadows, revealing themselves to the world and calling upon all the preparations they had made over the centuries. The battle that followed was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Order's warriors fought alongside the living, using weapons and magic that had been preserved since the first long night. Their knowledge of the enemy's weaknesses proved crucial, and their ability to coordinate the various factions fighting against the darkness made the difference between victory and defeat. Daemon's return during this final battle was the culmination of the Pact of Blood that had been signed so many centuries before. The Order's magic called him back from the realm of the dead, giving him corporeal form once more, so that he could lead the charge against the Night King himself. The sight of the legendary rogue prince riding once again into battle, wielding Bloodbane, and mounted on a dragon of shadow and flame, inspired the living forces and struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. The final confrontation between Daemon and the Night King was a battle that transcended the physical realm. A clash of wills and ancient magic that shook the very foundations of the world. In the end, it was Daemon's sacrifice that made victory possible, as he used the last of his strength to shatter the magical bonds that held the army of the dead together. With the ancient enemy finally defeated, the Order's long vigil came to an end. They had fulfilled their purpose, protecting the world from the darkness that had threatened to consume it, but their work was not entirely finished. For they understood that new threats would always emerge, and the world would always need guardians to stand against them. The Order's final act was to ensure that the knowledge and wisdom they had accumulated over the centuries would not be lost. They established new libraries and schools, trained new generations of watchers and guardians, and created systems that would allow their mission to continue even if their organization itself were to fade away. The Pact of Blood between Daemon Targaryen and the Order of the Crimson Dawn had been more than just an agreement between allies. It had been a binding that transcended time and death itself. Through their alliance, they had saved the world from destruction and ensured that the light of civilization would continue to burn, even in the darkest of times. In the end, the story of the Pact of Blood serves as a reminder that the greatest victories are often won not through individual heroism, but through the cooperation of those who understand that some causes are greater than any single life or ambition. Daemon Targaryen and the Forgotten Order had sacrificed everything for the greater good, and their legacy would endure long after their names had been forgotten by history. The blood of the dragon had been preserved. The ancient enemy had been defeated, and the world had been saved. The Pact of Blood had been fulfilled, and the Order of the Crimson Dawn could finally rest, knowing that their long watch was over, and that the future was secure. But in the shadows of the world, new watchers would always be ready to take up the burden when the time came, for the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and the cost of peace is the willingness to fight for it when all seems lost.